Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision for the annual approval by the House of Commons of maximum numbers in respect of immigration and asylum, to provide that asylum may be granted to individuals identified as refugees by the UN Refugee Council, other than in specified circumstances and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm delighted to be bringing in this bill. The British people want Parliament and their representatives to get to grips with immigration, both illegal and legal. It is a widespread conviction held by constituents across parties and across regions. According to YouGov, 64% of voters think that immigration has been too high over the last 10 years. Only 6% believe it has been too low. On the island, according to my most recent survey of 2,000 constituents, it is the second most important issue after the NHS. This bill, my bill, helps reinforce parliamentary sovereignty, encourages transparency in decision-making, focuses responsibility on members of Parliament, and in doing so helps restore faith in government and in Parliament. Now, we have made a considerable success of immigration in the past 50 years in the post-war period, and there is an accepted case that moderate migration is a good thing for our country. Now, I'm hugely proud to be English and British, but in fact I'm half immigrant myself. I don't necessarily think of myself often in those terms. But my ancestors and my mum after World War II ended up in Dresden in a displaced persons camp. For 2 centuries, her ancestors came from the Russian Empire. They were a mix of German, and if I understand, Polish and Ukrainian ancestry. They farmed near Zhytomyr, 60 miles west of Kiev. The other half of me is solidly English. But wherever you come from, there is a shared sense that migration should be moderate and should be controlled. Now, this government is doing more than any other in recent years. We hear today that the removals are up 25% of illegal people. The Rwanda scheme is due to start later this year, whatever you think of it. We have growing numbers of return agreements with other nations. But I think we need something more permanent, because all this requires political will. And I think, for me, the only way that ultimately we will solve this issue and that we will give our voters and our constituents a confidence in this issue is for Parliament to take responsibility on itself, to set annual legal limits for legal migration, including for asylum. The only way MPs will be serious about this issue is if we have to look our constituents in the eye and explain our actions. There will be no hiding behind quangos or behind agencies. My plan, my bill, would require the government to present a figure or range of figures to Parliament. MPs will have the access to the same data. We and the British people could see what each figure would deliver in terms of costs, in terms of benefits. What would the effect be on housing, on public services, on the economy, on social cohesion? It is extraordinary that this debate thus far has been happening without reference to many other of these important issues, that somehow immigration can be debated without talking about housing, without talking about education, without talking about healthcare provision. Either way, at the end of the day, MPs will own the figure, and they will have to explain it to their constituents. It is called democracy, and in my mind, it is a good thing. If there are emergencies such as Hong Kong or Ukraine, ministers can come back and ask for a waiver for specific numbers, in line with our international obligations. The critical point here, Madam Deputy Speaker, is I'm not stipulating a figure. I'm not sort of plucking one out of thin air. It is the principle of parliamentary sovereignty which I would have thought we should all, as parliamentarians, want to support. In theory, the Labour Party could say that we want 1 million plus a year migration. The Lib Dems, they're meant to be here to oppose, but they're so concerned to be here, I can't see a single one of them who is meant to be speaking in opposition. The Lib Dems or the SNP, who are here in force, could suggest 2 million. In theory, Parliament could decide what it wants, but it is about giving power back to Parliament. And for me, Madam Deputy Speaker, this debate and this plan touches on wider issues that are parliamentarians passing their powers, their responsibilities to others. In scandal after scandal, we see experts failing and politicians having to effectively cover for them, whether it's the post office scandal or whether it's the contaminated blood scandal. The answer is not less power to Parliament. It's not more quangos, it's not more experts, it's actually more debate, more scrutiny, more transparency, so that people can see what is happening in their name and they can test and judge the people who make those decisions. Now, granted, if there's a Conservative government, the practical outcome of that bill, of my bill, will be to lower legal migration from its current levels to something, dare I say, in line with our manifesto commitments. But it is also about greater thought as to what our nation wants and needs. Our honourable friends from Market Harbour and Newark, in their excellent Centre for Policy Studies report, demolished many of the lazy arguments about migration that is automatically associated with economic growth. Arguably, the era of mass migration has seen slower economic growth per capita. We know that mass migration exacerbates pressure on social housing and health standards and health services. Our build rate, by historic standards, is actually pretty healthy at the moment, but it is dwarfed because of the high net migration. So my bill will force us to think, do we really need to grant visas for jobs that British people could do with a bit of encouragement or higher wages? One of the great ironies of this debate is that people who want large-scale immigration are doing so at the price of suppressing wages of some of the poorest people in this country. And you would have thought the SNP and the Lib Dems and the Labour Party, who profess to care for the working people, would consider some of these arguments. So rather than hoovering up computer programmers and doctors and dentists and care workers from other countries, why don't we train up some more ourselves? My bill also would make civil servants maybe think more carefully about getting their numbers correct. The Department for Health forecast 6,000 people would use the health and social care visa route. In fact, 146,000 people did last year, with 203,000 dependents. That is a population 1.5 times the size of Portsmouth. We need to think about the impact of these decisions we are making, where the civil servants are getting the numbers so phenomenally, dramatically wrong. I'd also like to touch briefly on asylum as well. We've granted asylum to nearly 500,000 people since 2015. Again, extraordinary number. There are 9 safe and legal routes into this country. There were 10 at the time, because that included Syria. But to prevent a pull factor and to ensure that people have confidence that refugees are refugees, I would argue, or I would like this bill to have all refugees coming via UN programmes. Now, I don't think the UNHCR, the UN High Commission of Refugees, behaved particularly well over the Rwanda ruling. But it is still the only global body that looks after refugees. And my plan would see our country only take refugees that come via bona fide UN-approved refugees from genuine war-torn areas. This would strengthen, again, people's confidence in the system. It will also give the added benefit of cutting back on our own asylum system, which, sad to say, is increasingly unfit for purpose. What sane system gives 50% of people from Albania asylum when they come from a safe European country? It is simply not credible. So my bill enhances democracy, enhances accountability, enhances transparency. Certainly its intention. Those opposing the bill, respectfully, I say this to them, but I'm grateful the SNP have turned up. I wish the Liberals had, because apparently they were speaking against this. They're opposing parliamentary scrutiny. They're opposing powers being handed back to members of Parliament. They're opposing transparency, and they are setting themselves against the will of the people of Scotland and the people of Britain. We need more transparency, Madam Deputy Speaker, in our national decision-making. We need to question civil servants and experts more, not less. We need greater scrutiny and a greater role for Parliament to allow MPs and the public that level of scrutiny that enables good government. That is the purpose of this bill. It is to give Parliament power to set migration numbers. The British people want a fair but robust immigration system. They are right. My new law will deliver that and make sure that we, members of Parliament, are answerable to our people. Thank you.